Hello, viewers, and welcome to week 4 of the UK Venus Project Supporter Show. I'm Tom Hockney, and with me today, my co-host, I think that's the right word for it, Aiden Fry.
I'll take it. Hi, welcome. Thanks, guys.
And Jan.
Hi.
Is your second name? No,
Jan Seidler.
Yeah, I thought so. Jan Seidler, yeah. And today's topic, we're going to be discussing communication and general semantics. And we're going to be starting off with a short video. Jean, do you want to explain the video? You know more about it than I do.
Yeah, it's basically a video where Bob Pula, the biographer of Alfred Korzybski, defines general semantics, the whole study of Alfred Korzybski's Science and Sanity, and how to communicate better with fellow men and women.
Okay, and without further ado, unless Aiden wants to say something.
That's cool.
Alright, I saw you breathe and I thought you were like ready. Okay, let's go for it.
Right. Yeah, let's go.
That we're going to talk about as a system of evaluation, a tool for sizing things up. What could be simpler? A tool that presumably, if you work at it, it ain't going to do anything for you. But if you work at it, you may find that you develop an increasing ability to self-challenge, to evaluate your own evaluations, and in the process perhaps become more and more of what we like to think of as a human being. Fairly reasonable, somewhat kind, a time binder who isn't willing or isn't unwilling to help other folks out. We call it a system, and by a system, all I'm going to mean in this context is an organized, self-consistent set of statements. Period. Nothing could be almost more abrasively simple than that. A set of related statements that are self-consistent. We claim that general semantics constitutes a system in that sense. General semantics is non-essentialist. Put that on the board. Okay, strong. And I've learned to emphasize this after doing this, working with people for many years now, because sometimes it seems to me that people seem to develop the notion, and this is not hung high, so you're familiar. How many of you have seen a representation like this called the structural differential? Everybody's familiar with this, right? No. Yeah, fine. So you can imagine what's down the bottom, which is the higher orders of abstracting and all that stuff. Very often, I have found that people are quite good at working at recognizing that how they verbalize should not be confused with the nonverbal experiences that they have. We say the map is not the territory. All of your formulations, although they might be accurate, they might fit the territory well, they should never be identified with or confused with the territory. That's all identity means, or it's essentially what it means. It's a tendency to confuse our mapping with whatever it is that we're mapping. Well, most people get that pretty well, I think. What seems a lot harder is to recognize that the nonverbal experiences are not it either. Your nonverbal experiences are your nonverbal experiences, but they ain't the territory either, in the sense of extranodal space and all that jazz. All right? Non-essential. Sometimes people who study general semantics seem to feel that, well, if I can scrape away all of this mistaken formulating that I've been doing for so many years, and I've adopted so many systems, which I now recognize are poor mappings. If I could do that, then I will be open to seeing it like it is. And it's been a source of some dismay to me. I have to admit that, quite frankly. people who've studied for a long time a discipline which says such outlandish things as whatever you say a thing is, it is not, seem to still keep coming up with this business of, oh yeah, I know my verbalizing is all, that can't be the experience. But if I'm quiet and remain open, then I will experience the naked it. Well, I'm here to say that at least my approach to general semantics is that if you study the discipline and work at it, you will come to recognize that there's no escape from your own abstracting, and in ways that we will define abstracting as we go along. As far as I know, you cannot leap out of yourself as an abstracting nervous system. It's a kind of imprisonment. But it makes for an exciting life, because recognizing that you are thus imprisoned, you can spend a lot of time trying to make contact with your fellow human beings who are also abstracting more or less desperately, but who may also be looking for contact. Even if you recognize that the contact you experience is necessarily your own experience, that doesn't diminish the experience.
Okay, so I personally found that a little bit, didn't understand fully what he was talking about to begin with. I think it was kind of, well, my interpretation was it was the abstract of how you interpret a situation, how you kind of put it into words, and how you think about it is different to the actual situation itself, that kind of thing. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, that's basically that the words themselves are not the situations that we experience, even though sometimes we think they are.
Like how you may have an experience and then put it into certain words, and over time, when you explain it to people and you think about it using those words, the original experience changes, kind of thing.
Exactly, it morphs, it transforms. And that's why we cannot, there is also always this susceptibility of misunderstanding the other person. That's why he talks about reference, also in Alfred Korzybski's words, this real world reference that are in accord to the natural world. Instead of saying good or bad, saying more like, oh, he was subjected to that kind of behavior, therefore he manifests that behavior. I don't know if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like how a lot of speech is kind of nothing really, don't really portray much much detail. Like, if a lot of people say like the weather's bad kind of thing, but I like rain, and so to me that doesn't really make any sense. That's not really very good communication, if you know what I mean. Or the word love, for example, like it's kind of bunching an absolute multitude of emotions and feelings and concepts into just one tiny one-syllabic word. Yeah.
And the associations you make, for example, with the word love can be different for you than it can be different for the other person. So when people talk about the absolute love, about the love, this word that somehow they want to make it universal, that's not possible, because other people have other associations with that word, other feelings, perhaps other emotions, and talking in absolutes can also lead us to huge misunderstandings.
That's something that I've kind of recognized through my investigations and stuff, and just the way that we word things are like constant. We try to make things as universal and as constant as possible. You say things like, that is hot, the weather is bad. But it's relational words that really explain whether something's hot. Something isn't hot or cold, it's only hot or cold in relation to something else.
Yeah.
So you say it's hotter than water.
Yeah.
It's not hot forever and ever.
Yeah. Sorry.
I think that's a common problem with quite a lot of people. The way people think is because they use terms that are meant to be constants, meant to be forever, have one single meaning. When if looking through semantics, something that Hayakawa says is that a word's meaning is defined by its context, which is the words around it, their place around it, and your kind of memory context of what you understand that word has meant before and in the past.
Yeah.
And so what that really means is that no word could ever have exactly the same meaning twice.
Yeah. For example, there's a good example, expanding on the example you use about hot and cold. There's this bucket example that, for example, you have bucket A, bucket B, and bucket C, right? Bucket A is 10 degrees Celsius, bucket B is 30 degrees Celsius, and bucket C is 50 degrees Celsius. So if you put your hand first in bucket A, that is 10 degrees Celsius, and then put it in bucket B, then it will feel really hot, you know, it will feel much hotter than it was with bucket A. But if you put your hand first in bucket C, that is 50 degrees Celsius, and then you put it in bucket B, that is 30 degrees Celsius, then it would feel colder. So that tells you something about language, that it has to be on the situation basis, on the point of view. For example, I cannot say, like you mentioned, just to expound upon it, I cannot say it's cold or it's hot, because the other person, if he doesn't feel cold or hot, he will not know what you're talking about.
But there is like situations where abstractions like it's cold like is useful, because it's better than sitting down and explaining for 20 minutes exactly why it's cold. And but there's situations for that, and the situation normally is with people that you've already met before. You come to a common understanding on certain uses of certain words. So, and that's kind of how things like in jokes occur, like group jokes that no one understands, and it would take so long to explain that there's no need, because you get that kind of group understanding. Where it's possible to do that, but you can't use a group or an in joke in, you know, like the headline of a news article or something where so many, like the audience is very, very broad and they're not going to understand where you're coming from.
Interesting. I never viewed it that way.
And then there is kind of language which escapes the confines of subjectivity, where, you know, like mechanical language or mathematics. So 1 centimeter, universally, as long as you understand what that's a reference to, will always be the same size, kind of thing. Actually, I'm actually not sure about that. Like down to the very, very fine level, there's probably a difference between 2 different centimeters. Like one will be bigger and one will be smaller. Yeah. But generally speaking, I think that's the case.
And that's why the scientific attitude is also so advantageous to us as perhaps as species, humans, because there is a level in which we can all agree with. We can test things out, we can gather data, analyze it, and prove or disprove our laid out hypothesis. Because it's interesting, in Alfred Korzybski's work of Science and Sanity, he classifies the abstractions of orders in 4 orders. He goes from the event or the scientific object. That's you know, the base level of every perception we have. Measurable. It's measurable. That's the scientific object. The ordinary object in this case is what we, for example, apple. That's as we view apple. You know, I view an apple and I can eat it, but I have not studied the submicroscopic level. So it's ordinary object. Then we label it. We label it apple. When we teach our children that is an apple, then he grows up thinking the object itself is the word. You know, apple is that object, which is also according to Korzybski not true. And we go to describe the apple, what it is, how its structure is laid out, its relations, and then we begin to make inferences. That's the highest level of abstraction, is inferences. Those are the opinions or the propositions or the conclusions. And that's also something that we as a species can have high levels of abstraction. Perhaps that's because of the brain size, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. Buddhism teaches pretty much the exact same thing as well. 'Cause I was interested in Buddhism a while ago, and like they said a similar thing with like a book. Like we see a book, and we kind of see it as just this single word book. But what constitutes a book? You know, paper and the cardboard and the pictures and the writing, the ink, and all these different things. That's kind of the constitution of a book, and that's on like a not even like an atomic level either. That's just it's ink kind of thing, and then like how much ink and like the color of the ink, the consistency, things like that, and we just label it as a book.
Yeah. And it's also important to differentiate between semantics and general semantics, because, as I will quote Alfred Korzybski, what he says about general semantics is basically, general semantics represents a process-oriented, problem-solving system that trains individuals to make their language and thinking more relative to objective reality in order to better evaluate and understand the world. So that's very different from the word semantics that studies the meaning of words, but it's highly intertwined that the words we use to describe the world are also the way we perceive the world. If they are more accurate to base level reality, more relative rather than absolute, then we can have a better chance at communicating.
More measurable as well. So like if someone were to use the word evil, for example, and you don't really, like if you ask someone what does evil mean and they said that it's just a bad person kind of thing, I think that would be like a low level of understanding of the word and the semantics of the word. But if people were, you know, were taught on how to question their own use of language and the meaning behind the language they use, then maybe people would be more inclined to kind of really go down to it and say, that guy's evil. Okay, why? You know, because he acted in a certain way. You know, you can maybe allow people the tools to analyze their own values more efficiently, rather than just using words which kind of mean something really, really broad and really, really detailed.
Yeah. Because if you label someone evil, you're tarring them in your mind like from now till forever. Like, whereas if you could explain it in a way that was more accurate, more relativistic, then you'll have more of a chance of understanding the situation, how, like, rather than just going you're evil and punishing them forever, you can maybe think about how you could change them and stuff like that. I think like maybe this comes out from kind of not Newtonian physics, but that kind of idea where there was a lot of constants and stuff, and it seems to me like the rise of like general semantics kind of through the early like 1920s and through to now, kind of like it seems to kind of coincide with the idea of like relativistic physics, I think, a lot more, and taking that kind of idea of things being in constant flux, nothing like repeating, nothing staying the same forever, and trying to apply that to our language a bit more.
Yeah. Imagine our technology progressing, but our methods of thinking stagnating. And that's what also Korzybski aims with his work, to upgrade our understanding, to be one relativistic and two also open to evolving and developing. Because if we think in terms of age-old good and bad, I mean that kind of language politicians use a lot. You know, the political sphere uses those words to perhaps further their political agenda, or generate these emotions in people. But it's the day, a few days ago, I had an interesting discussion with my brother, and he told me a peculiar thing about prejudice. Right? He told me that prejudice emerges when people don't have the time to think deeply about things, because perhaps they work 10 hours a day or 8 hours in this labor for income economy, and they don't have time to do a sound and well-researched assessment about behavior. So, for example, if they see a pedophile, they pedophile. You know, this is a lower level of abstraction rather than human. If they would see a higher level of abstraction and they see the other person that engages in this pedophilic behavior, they would ask themselves, what makes this pedophile behavior emerge? You know, what makes this person want to do this to children, rather than saying, oh, pedophile equals bad, and that's that. He goes to bed. The next day he goes to work again, and he has a clear conscience, you know. And that's not what we are trying to achieve here. We're trying to achieve that people talk to one another, but really talk to one another and tell each one how they feel, what do they mean by their words, but not extensively, but more accurately, you know. Perhaps that can diminish the misunderstandings.
I found, like, maybe in the kind of short term of me learning this stuff, that like, it sometimes does take me a bit longer to explain myself a bit more, but as and I can see myself getting a bit better at this now, as you kind of keep practicing and keep learning about these ideas, then it kind of comes more naturally. It's more like a reflex, or with memory muscle, kind of muscle memory, when you have to play the piano song 100 times before you can actually learn it. Like, you can know all the notes and you can know all the theory, but you have to practice it for a while.
Yeah.
So, but through that, like, I think this has particularly been useful to me, and especially trying to understand where conflict occurs in either conversations that I'm having or other things that I see on Facebook groups or whatever. I can now kind of identify the misunderstandings in arguments to come, and I try and point them out and say, guys, come on, like, oh, I'll explain it further, or say, what do you mean by this? Like, and because I think that's really the problem that we have with most arguments, that you get a misunderstanding and that kind of builds up into a heated emotional argument, which is like not cooperation, which is what language is for.
Yeah, like, learning about general semantics has helped me in certain fields, especially with other people who have also studied it and kind of are scientific minded, but it kind of has alienated my ability to communicate with most people sometimes. Like, in an argument, a lot of people get, like, really emotional, and the way they talk, I find myself ending in pointing out kind of like where the language can be misinterpreted and really getting down to it, and people interpret that as kind of me being a dick, like, just for the sake of it. Like, oh, what do you mean by that? So, like, an example I had, just trying to think. I think they said something like human nature, and I was like, oh, what do you mean by human nature? So, you know what I mean by human nature, you know. And without this, like, basic understanding of interpretability of words and things like that, it's really hard to communicate with people. And I'd just like to give a cool example on how language affects our intelligence. And it was a study with 3 tribes. I'm not sure much on the details of the study, but basically what I remember is there were 3 tribes, and then there was also I think it was Germany, a Western kind of nation, and they were all given the task of describing how many cows they saw in a field, and there were 20 cows. So the Germans went, most of them, like pretty much all of them, counted to 20 and went, okay, 20 cows. Now that's a really accurate representation for anyone else who also understands the word 20 as to how many cows are in the field. But then there was a tribe that their number system only went up to 12, and then they got to 12, and they said there are 12 cows and a little bit more. Or they said there's 12 cows and then there's also 6. But they couldn't... No. Okay, also 8. No, well, maybe they were inaccurate, yeah. Not me, but yeah. And then and then there was another tribe that could only count to 5, and they were like, 4 lots of 5 cows. I did that on purpose.
Nice.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And so yeah, language really... You know, the way we like Jacques once said as well, thinking about things is basically just talking to yourself in your head. And if the tools you've got for that, your language, the way you talk to yourself, is impaired, then so is your thinking process.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a good quick way. Sorry, Jean, you can go in a sec.
No, I just said wow.
Yeah. There's like on that kind of lines. There's a good kind of meme I think that I saw of I think it was Einstein that said, when I come up with an idea initially, and then I try and put it into words.
Yeah.
So even the way that we think now isn't necessarily in words that we can communicate.
Mm.
And this is the objective, non-describable world that Alfred Korzybski talks about, or the level where you cannot describe it because you get perhaps an idea, but you cannot put it into words. And when we put it into words, for example, this is a perfect example is speed reading. Why we read so slow? Because in school they teach us, for example, to read like, and the cat went over the wall, you know, and our thinking process slows down. But if you really read the speed readers, they read in blocks. They read cat and over the wall, key words. So that's also like Tom also mentioned, that today our language slows our thinking and even impairs. And I didn't think it that way, because that's interesting, because there was a quote, I don't remember who said this, but that all our knowledge has its origin in our perceptions, and that's how it's filtered, I think, perhaps.
Yeah, because there is no base object or base universe that we can measure without a perception.
Yeah.
So, and it's all there. We can kind of take measurements, and we're pretty certain that it's all there. We're not all just making it up in our heads, but we can't see it for what it really is, which is, I think, very interesting.
And regarding the kind of thought process thing you're on about, like how I realized it before, and Jacques mentions as well actually, how like we can think really quickly just on impulse about something. So I think I want to go get some food from the kitchen. I want cereal, and that's just like it's kind of described in this concept of the action that I want to take and the emotions that are attached to it. But then I literally think the words in my head, and that slows me down quite a lot. And I realized that, and I was kind of annoyed by it. And like, I think it'd be really cool if I could kind of develop the ability to think on the impulse without having to describe everything to myself in my mind. I think that would allow me to think much quicker, kind of thing.
And that's
the internal voice is sorry.
No problem.
It's interesting. I find, like, reading books, reading books for escapism. So like, I read sci-fi books every now and again just to kind of relax and take my mind off things. And I tend to find I start off reading and I'm actually in my head reading the words to myself. But after like maybe 5 minutes, I'm not even reading the words on the paper. My internal voice has disappeared, and I'm actually like somehow within the world and imagining it, but I'm only looking at a Kindle screen.
Yeah, and your head is painting pictures, right? There's a quote from Jacques, but I don't know exactly where it is. Sorry, but it says the following, which I found really, really enlightening. In the future, people using computers could create a language that would provide closer understanding and a simpler structure, with less dependence on speech. For example, a series of signals combining acoustical, optical, olfactory, and teletactile electronic pattern will tell a story in seconds rather than in many sentences or pages. And that may be the communication of the future, but we're still not there yet. We are still in the process of upgrading our language patterns, our methods of thinking, our values. If we are to achieve that kind of technology, we first have to modify our values and our methods, because there are three factors that coincide: the technology, methods of thinking, and values. If our values are not upgraded, or our methods of thinking for that matter, those kind of technologies will not even be given birth to, because it's what people want to produce. If a violent nation wants to destroy another nation, of course they are going to build the atom bomb rather than research on solar energy or geothermal to really if you like to survive towards the future.
I was watching a video earlier, and just a lecture video from the 50s, and the guy was talking about research into cancer, and so that's been going for 60 years now, and we've advanced our technological capabilities, absolutely skyrocketed, but we still haven't kind of found a proper cure for cancer, and there are these methods of kind of dealing with the symptoms, and there are controversial ones, like weed and marijuana, basically things like that. But it does make me think, if it were advantageous to the drug companies which fund research and things like that to cure cancer, then it would have been cured a long time ago. It's like the values of the system, like you just said.
Well, there would have been at least a lot more motivation to cure cancer.
Resources
allocated, things like that.
Yeah, the incentive would not be to make profit out of curing cancer, but actually curing cancer. Because if you concentrate on making a profit, then you will extend that process. You will even manage lengthier processes in which you can make more money, and that's highly corruptible in any system. Sooner or later, it will get loused up. Yeah, sorry.
Even like coming in with, like if you want to start up a new R&D lab into cancer and whatever, like even coming into it the best of heart, like you're either going to have to be a charity, which is kind of fairly inefficient and relying on donations, or you're going to have to turn a profit, otherwise it's just going to get shut down. And like just having that motivation to start off with, just to survive, you have to create a little bit of profit. It just kind of tends to spiral out of control. So you can see where these guys, like, they might have even started coming from, but they might not end up in the situation which they want to be because of the monetary system and stuff. If we could just give them a lab and say go, and not even be separated into different, because there's different labs competing over who's going to have the best drug, whereas really, like, if there's so many people who are into it, let's pool the resources together and actually do it.
Yeah. I can't even begin to imagine what world would emerge if people are given the tools to think properly, along the methods of science, and more importantly, that they begin to cooperate. Because today, even if you cooperate, this dog-eat world, by the system, you get taken advantage of. You can, for example, tell another person, oh, this is how you create a better drug, for example, for aspirin, just as a silly example, and then he will go and patent it because he wants to make money out of it. Perhaps does he have the blame? I mean, if he even might have a daughter, a son he wants to feed, a wife. We are led to this behavior. We are somewhat steered toward this behavior because the framework itself in which we operate society today is highly inefficient and highly malleable to anyone's wishes, the demagogue or any power structure.
Like, society basically is a set of mechanisms and functions which allow multiple humans and other animals to coexist and behave optimally and optimally, like happy and things like that in nature, in our environment. And the profit motive doesn't serve that at all anymore. It's skewed off from the purpose, the reason why we form societies, the reason why we gather together in communities. It's complete on a tangent.
And there's, sorry, if I can interpose quickly, there's a perfect example of those society, that divide and conquer. In the beginning we were tribes, right? And it was more useful to call myself, for example, the Tintin tribe, and then the other tribe was the Buru Buru tribe or such. But at that time it was it was useful for survival to separate myself from other tribe because of scarce resources. But today we don't suffer that anymore. It's like we behave as we were 2,000 years ago, still on, you know, on hunchback horses, and still on the crop fields not without tractors like today. But today we could produce so much, but the price sinks when you overproduce. And what do industries do with that overproduction? They destroy it, and then it gets skewed off, and then they say, oh, it's not because of the free market. And that's another word that is meaningless. The free market system. Let the market be free and let everyone sell their products. It's another word for saying, let us do what we want and not suffer any consequences, please.
Yeah. But like, the thing is, like, through all this, and we're told that we're all really competitive and stuff, but really the history of humanity, since we got past roaming little tribes, but even then, little tribes that tended to be family groups and stuff, it was a cooperative group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've kind of gone up the levels of cooperation. We've gone from small family groups, then we started making towns.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of got together more cooperative. Then communication really came about, and we started getting languages. Language is pure cooperation. If you can understand the words that I'm saying, then you are cooperating with me. People don't understand how much cooperation there is within our society.
Yeah.
Like, everyone, pretty much 99% of people today that have jobs are not working on things that directly support themselves. They're working on products for other people, which means that they are dependent on other people to create products for you. Entirely dependent on other people. If you look at just a week's shopping, everything that you buy, all the food, your petrol, like anything like that, you're all entirely dependent on the cooperation of other people to create those resources and make them available to you.
Yeah, and an example of an institution today which requires cooperation, the military. So, I mean, people may say human beings can't cooperate, but there's the Air Force, the Navy, the ground forces, infantry, all in a complex, communication pattern cooperation for a common goal. That common goal is destruction, yeah, but it's still cooperation. It's an example of cooperation, and also international scientific bases, so like international space stations and things, where you have people from different nationalities working together, again, for a common goal, and cooperation is prevalent there.
And to me, that's our biggest challenge right now, is to outgrow nations, because that's kind of where we got to, and families, towns, nations, and like religious groups was in there as well, but that's kind of declining. We're now kind of back to nations, or like supranations like the EU, stuff like that. So, but I think we really need to get out there and start really cooperating on a global level.
Yeah, and I mean, even if we want to outgrow nations into a worldwide scale, right? Like the Venus Project proposes with a resource-based economy, it's important to know that the structure has to change. It's not going to be like this, elitist world globalization, this new world order that some spheres keep talking about. It's going to be more based on cybernation, on real world information, better communication, abundance. Because today, if you have a world government, that world government is also composed of people. The structure is the same, this pyramid, this pyramid power, and people are going to fight for that power. But if you distribute knowledge, if you distribute resources intelligently, then you have another kind of behavior, one that perhaps resembles what can truly be called a civilization, and not this, age-old tribal mentality.
And in a resource-based economy as well, decisions, they're not centralized. It's not like there is a body which distributes resources. It's an automatic process based on demand and based on availability, and also recycling in that as well, and sustainability and things like that. Just thought I'd point that out.
Yeah. And that comes also with a better description of the world, a better, operational definition of how society should work. Because Alfred Korzybski also stated something important. He mentions in language, structure alone and relation is what is important. Because the words themselves, if you take apple and you don't, without relation, I just tell you apple, then what are you going to expect as communication? I have to tell you, for example, I'd like to eat an apple. There's words that relate to that word, that describe it, that ground it more to reality. And that can change, I think, with more training, because no master was born a master. Every master was once a beginner. And we have, if we have, or if we want, we can begin anywhere.
I'd like to talk about the thing on this document we've all got open, the political spheres. Unless anyone's got anything else to add.
No, that's good.
No.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It says here basically terrorist and how that word is used by like the popular media and politicians and the government or whatever, these bodies of power, to kind of stir an emotion in people, and it portrays a picture, but then how that can be changed and how that can be edited. So if you link terrorist to someone who causes mass destruction of your happiness, things that you like, and damages you in a way, and then you will elect that word to something else that doesn't necessarily do that, even if it's not conscious, you'll subconsciously maybe see that thing as a bad thing. So someone who protests in the street, for example, protests capitalism, if they're labeled a terrorist, then even subconsciously people are going to associate that with like a bad thing. So if you can create these words, if a body of power can create these words and create these associations in the mind of a population, then they can be used really powerfully to influence that population.
Yeah. And that tells you something about how a population behaves, or how they act. That tells you that words are important. Emotions more than words are important, because they inject these emotions in these words. For example, when you hear the word pedophilia, or someone talks about pedophilia, immediately you get the image of children being molested, and then your emotions spring up, and that generally obfuscates rational thought as to analyzing the circumstances at a more deeper level. And in the case of political spheres, it's also important. I sometimes compare the word terrorist today as the word witches, some 200, 300 years ago, when they still burned witches. I mean, at that time, the one controlling the word and the associations was the church. But today, it's the state. They can tag anyone as a terrorist and imprison them, or perhaps sometimes bomb them, sadly.
Or communism as well, from the 50s, because they did that like openly, tag people as communists if they didn't swear allegiance and these kind of things, and then kick them out of the country.
Yeah, and that also has to do with the two-valued logic, right? Either you are a capitalist, like we are, or you're a communist, and that's bad, Either us or them, and that mentality of them and us is also highly counterproductive, I think, in the long run for our survival.
Definitely. Divide and conquer again.
Yeah. And it's like this constants thinking, there's no middle ground, it's black and white. And really there is every middle ground.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I realized earlier, I was just walking, and I can't remember what it was I was thinking about, but I do think in black and white quite a lot, and it really does impede on my ability to just contemplate and to think intellectually, thinking in black and whites. And well, I'm going to try and do it less. I'm not sure how I'll go about it, but
yeah.
The thing is with black and white and stuff, it kind of comes out of the way that we think about things. I wonder if you guys could finish this word for me. I'll spell it out one letter at a time.
Okay.
C.
Okay.
A.
Wait. Can.
R.
Carnivore.
Car.
Carnivore.
Car.
Ah,
Car.
Does carnivore have two R's?
2 R's. Oh,
Carrot.
see, yeah, there you go.
Boom.
So the human brain has the ability to finish a pattern when it's only half seen. Maybe that wasn't a great example, but you can often do it with drawings. If you like half do a draw, like if you sit down and draw something, maybe like pictogram, you can get your meaning across before you finish the whole image. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
That's deduction, right? If I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken.
Well, it's your brain's ability and kind of like reflex to go, that might be this. When it half sees a pattern, it will go, it might be this, it might be this, it might be this, and that'll kind of come up to you, and within kind of like subconsciously, you'll be kind of rating possibilities of what that word could be, or what that symbol could be, or what a meaning could be. So it's something that humans do, and it was particularly good back in the day when, if you saw, this was roaming around in tribes with spears, you saw something stripy, and you go, that might be a tiger, you run away.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of inquisitiveness, and it might be this, was really useful, and it's something that we still do. But it's something that we can understand, I think, now a bit better. And kind of, once you understand your brain does that, you can kind of stop yourself rushing to conclusions sometimes.
Mm.
Yeah. Delay the immediate emotional response, perhaps. The instant reflex.
Or understand it, at least.
Yeah.
That's something we were talking about last 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Something Alfred Korzybski sometimes labels as semantic reactions, how the nervous system reacts to the outside world, right? And also, we have to be taught this, perhaps words or these concepts, because many people when they listen to some TVP advocates, right, and they say, oh, they only talk about education, but where are the actual cities, right? But it's important to know that if you don't offer people, this set of values, this set of perhaps options of thinking, of imagination. For example, an example that just pops out like that: if I have never seen a plane, an airplane, I cannot know that they even exist. I would not even know how to begin to construct them. And that's also how knowledge is built. We build upon one another, and we build step by step. And then if I have seen a plane, then I will say, oh, my capacity of imagining, of building a plane will be greater. And the same is with this concept of a resource-based economy in these new cities. If people if people are provided this information, these alternatives, via understandable wording, understandable concepts, perhaps videos, documentaries, then they will have this alternative in mind. And when perhaps a collapse arrives, then people will say, oh, I still have this option. They will have a referent, like the word carrot, CARR. They will then say, oh, resource-based economy. So you spell them RB, and they will say E, resource-based economy. They will have managed to feel this way, to have, oh yeah, we have options. It's not either communist or capitalist. It's not either free market or dictatorship. All these limited valued logics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the associations in your brain and stuff. And if you haven't had the experience, you can't think of it when the time comes. You can't make a choice that you've never had an experience of.
Yeah.
Which is what we're doing here, which is why we're trying to get the word out as much as possible.
Mm. I mean, I've heard from a lot of people when they first get introduced to like the Vince project, and they say, I always kind of felt like something like this was possible, but I never had any idea about it, and I never, thought to advocate it or learn about it.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing, That's how I felt anyway.
Yeah.
And I think along the lines of communication stuff, if people are coming in that want to learn more about it, I've found the best way to really understand it is in one-to-one conversations or small group conversations with other people who know about the Venus Project. I found when I sat down and I watched a couple documentaries and stuff, and then I tried to speak to people who didn't know about the Venus Project, that was hard because I myself didn't know enough to answer most of the questions that people had, and and I hadn't thought them through and discussed them with people who have the ability to say, yes, that's right, no, that's wrong, here's how you might like to word that better, that kind of thing. That really helps a lot. So we have group meetings. Jan, you're the POC for Germany, are you now?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Do you do meetings and stuff over there as well?
When I talk to people, we sometimes gather and talk about this concept spontaneously, but scheduled meetings not of yet because the material is still being translated into the German language, and not everyone knows English, right?
Yep, that's me making an assumption. That's cool.
But those language barriers could also, provide a place to self-develop, right? I mean, when you learn a new language, that's interesting. A professor once told me, when you learn a new language, you just don't learn the language, the words. You learn the culture that speaks it. You learn the associations that are embedded in that language, in the wording itself. So in the transition, perhaps, in the resource-based economy, this language barrier, at the beginning it will be tough. It's no doubt about it. Communicating with other people that don't have the same language or means of expressing themselves as you or others do. But I mean, that's why we have science. At the risk of repeating myself, that's why we have these common methods where we can agree on things. Otherwise, we wouldn't have computers, we wouldn't have the internet, we wouldn't have airplanes, This breaks those language barriers. And if we can begin communicating along those lines, perhaps we can make it to do a more smoother, a more smoother bridging between nations, between cultures, between religions, perhaps. Because if I say, you're a Muslim, I'm a Christian, and then I criticize the Muslim faith, you will feel offended because you identify with the Muslim faith. Because you say, I am a Muslim, rather than saying, I am a person, a human, that studies the Muslim religion. That's two very different things.
That's true. And I think, so it's not just going to be the scientific language. There's going to be our salvation, I think, especially in the meantime. Because, say, for instance, a medical report, like a full-body medical report, is scientific language. But it's only information to someone who can interpret it. So a doctor. To someone like me, maybe I wouldn't understand all the charts and details and stuff. So in trying to bridge communication with different cultures, with different values, different languages, it's really the responsibility of the person who's trying to speak, is trying to communicate an idea, to try and word it in a way that the other person understands. If you need to sit down half an hour and just go through personal stuff and try and get a background of the person before you can really get into it, that's kind of advisable. Because then you can understand where their values are. You can maybe try and tailor your any kind of examples that you use to their value system, to their experiences. And in that way, we can try and raise kind of communication levels.
Alfred Korzybski said something interesting. Communication is like a game wherein both parties battle against the forces of confusion. And that perhaps that can be viewed that way. I don't know.
And I have high hopes with regards to language barriers. I have high hopes that the technology is going to come along and really sort us out, because things like Google Translate are getting pretty good now. I have a few people who don't speak English on my Facebook, and I try and speak to them in whatever their language is, but kind of going through Google Translate, because I don't have time to actually sit down and learn Spanish and German and that kind of stuff, because I'm just busy. But technology like that is enabling me to speak to people in Spanish at hopefully what is understandable, kind of an understandable level of communication. It's not great because I have little control over the specific wording, especially if we're talking semantically. Using a translator, like an automated translator like Google, probably isn't the best thing. But I don't know, hopefully, as I always explain that I'm using a translator machine, and if it says something wrong, then I'm sorry. But it's a way for me to kind of pick up little bits and pieces of different languages, and just try and kind of broaden my ability to communicate with people.
If they manage with Google Translate to make it directly with the audio, to translate it directly with the audio, that would be so cool, you know. You just speak to the other person and the thingy translate into their own language.
Yeah, I have a feeling you can do that.
I thought that was used between politicians, like really high-class meetings, that they have those kind of devices. But my source of thinking that is really inaccurate.
They have an interpreter, you know, a person that speaks both languages in a room, listening to one speech and translating into the other. So the algorithm is still to be developed.
Well, the thing is that on my phone, I have the Google Translate app, it's Android app, and you have voice recognition. So you can give it a try. If you're both there, you can voice recognition, and hopefully it should do all right. It's not there yet, I don't think, but it's coming. Coming very soon. There's actually with the Google Glasses, I heard the other day they're going to have in-view translations. So if you're in a different country and you look at something like that says, you know, exit left in German or I don't know, anything, like the idea is they can recognize that and translate it and overlay the English or whatever your language is just underneath.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah.
So the technology is pushing us along. So hopefully our language is also going to kind of evolve to become more globally, or at least we have people understand that you have the ability to talk to most people even if they speak different languages.
Yeah, that's great.
Which is good.
If language weren't so important, advertising and public relations wouldn't put so much emphasis on, you know, wording or presenting their products. For example, when Coca-Cola says Coca-Cola and then it's happiness or some cooked up slogan, then what they are aiming at is generating this emotional response, so that when you go to the shop, you feel happy about buying that product. And in other wording, that's brainwashing. If you really want to watch it, you know, pragmatically, that's brainwashing. That's shifting your values so that you consume products that you don't even know if they're healthy, because of perhaps reasons that studies were tweaked by the industry of, perhaps, just to have an example of Coca-Cola or the pharmaceutical industry. Doesn't matter, but they use those emotional responses in people, and with that they achieve associations with wording such as Coca-Cola or McDonald's, you know, those kind of things.
And it is not just words. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Young, but general semantics isn't just about words.
No.
It's about symbols in general.
Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, you know, having a beer advert with a sexy quotes girl sitting in front of a massive Lamborghini car or something, it creates associations without even saying the words.
Yeah. Exactly.
And this is something that really stuck with me from, I think, about my year 4 education, so maybe when I was about 10, we got told to make an advert for a pretend chocolate bar that we made up. And I wrote on it, it's better than Mars, as in Mars chocolate. And they were like, no, you can't say that, it's liable. What you can say is it's the best in the world. I was like,
are you kidding me?
That's a bigger lie.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest memories from my primary school education. Yeah. And so, how long did that stick with me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few of them as well.
It's very strange, but I don't know. I think advertising and PR is a whole other thing. There's a really good, I think it's 4-hour-long documentary series called the Century of the Self.
Oof, that's one keeper. Gold.
Yeah. With is it Bernays?
Yes, Edward Bernays.
Edward Bernays, that's it. And so if anyone's interested, advertising and PR and its rise throughout the last century, watch that video. I think it's on YouTube. It was when I looked. It's a BBC documentary, so maybe it got pulled.
Sorry if I interrupt you, but a sentence got stuck with me from that documentary. It was basically saying public relations and advertising managed to turn active citizens into passive consumers. That's what really stuck with me from that documentary, the 4-hour-long documentary. But sorry, go on.
There's actually a comedy video done by Mitchell and Webb, which really emphasized to me the way gender roles are played up in advertising. And from that moment onwards, I saw it a couple of years ago. Like, I knew about it, but it wasn't that prominent. And from that moment onwards, every time I see an advert of like beer or razors or shopping, and the amount of like general like sexism and like basically this mock advert that these comedians created is like it's weirdly similar to the actual adverts themselves. And it's like you could get them mixed up. Like if I didn't tell you it was a comedic advert, you might just watch it and go, "Oh, cool, that looks like a good shaver." So yeah.
And the associations that come with it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like how that's detrimental to people's thought process and the education, the population's education.
Yeah. Talking about associations, I found it that writing stories and reading them out are the best way to people to internalize some concepts. If I would like to read you a short story, if that's possible, some that I wrote a few days ago. Well, thank you. Here goes. Imagine yourself playing and running on an open field. The next thing you know it, you stumble with a stone lying on the ground and break your leg. You cry aloud, asking for aid. Up comes a salesman and asserts that everything is going to be all right. You just have to sit back, try to relax, drink a Coke, and have a Big Mac. Your leg still broken as it was from before the salesman appeared, throbbing with painful agony. Next appears a politician and tells you, no, you cannot walk until you cast a vote, and wait until I get elected. So I call upon a committee and in order to have a majority vote on whether your leg even needs healing. Perhaps it's just a mosquito bite. And then a priest, while you are trying to stand up and seek for help, comes into the scene and soothes your worries. Son, let's have a prayer, so that his might and power shall heal your leg. And in case you fail to see some healing progress and grow weary of the priest's claim, this one will interpose your growing questions and attempt to shut them down with a, "It is his will that you shall suffer for the sins of those who came before you. You must repent. You mustn't stand up. You shall obey his command." And once you are fed up with the excruciating pain of your leg, by now infected to the bone, a lieutenant appears to give you the sad news. Son, that leg is a deviant, a terrorist. We have to bomb it. And if that isn't enough, the lieutenant will try to convince you that your infected leg is not part of your body. Therefore, best to exterminate it, amputate it. You can't take it anymore. You stand up and shout, half limping, "No more!" You walk out the circle formed by the salesman, the politician, the priest, and the lieutenant. Those then, having vanished into thin air like a bad nightmare, and with a heavy limp walk the walk to the nearest hospital, and upon entering you shout out, "Doctor, help me. Your methods may not be perfect, but they work. Please give me science." All turns dark, then light appears. You open your eyes, you wake up. The end. Or the beginning. Who knows?
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I like it. And oh no, it's not there. Damn it! Sorry, I was trying to load up the special effects, the sound effects. It's great that I really like that the story. Here we go. Exactly. I think it's great because, like, I don't know if you want to go. Do you want to explain about the story, about why you wrote it?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about, I was just, thinking about stuff, thinking about the system, the social system we're living in, and then, I was thinking about finance, politics, religion, and military, right? Those four pillars, those four controlling pillars. Again, finance, politics, religion, and military are not and are no more than control mechanisms to keep people from asking questions. If politics cannot convince you that you do as the commanding ideology tells you, then religion tells you it's from a higher power, an unseen force that you cannot change, the will of the creator, so to speak. And if that fails, the people will try to convince you that, the market system, the free market, the invisible hand that many economists, if not all, talk about, that is the supposed efficiency driver and innovation. And if that fails, the military is there to, by force, force you to do things that you perhaps would not do otherwise. So in that line of thought, then it really struck me that science is one of the mechanisms that is there to clean up that mess, to clarify what is true, what is not, or what is relatively true. Perhaps something that is true today cannot be true in 100 years or 1,000 years. That's the discipline of science, proving things that you claim are true, false. Falsifying. That's the concept of falsifiability, if I express myself correctly. And if we can teach our future generations a more increasing scientific literacy, if they are more scientific literate, they will be more apt to become rational and not so emotionally invested in concepts like I am right and you are wrong. My God is better than your God, or my car is better than yours. It has a spoiler, turbo, and stuff like that. Or my ideology is better than yours. For example, I'm a communist, you're a capitalist. Oh, I'm better than you. Or I'm a capitalist, you're a communist. I say no. If you're not capitalist, you're the devil. You're evil. So, on that line of thought, we can achieve this. We can know the world through ourselves and others. We can study together. We can cooperate. And if we cannot achieve that, then we have at least to try. I mean, trying succeeds at sitting all day, at home, wishing that things will change for the better, instead of standing up and discussing with other people, building, constructing with them, instead of saying, oh, dear God, let's pray that the crop will be better. Why not irrigate the land? Why not talk to agronomists that can help you with that peril? And that's communication. Communicating with others so that you get more effectively more efficiently, accurately, precise, and perhaps we can develop art and at unimaginable scales as we do today. Today we sell art, but perhaps in the future we can share art. We can share knowledge and not sell it.
And an example of the difference as well between the application of science and, say, religion, for example, was a study done. Again, I don't know the exact details, but 2,500 people were told to pray for 50 people in a hospital and pray for their safety, but not another 50. And these 100 patients were in a study group in a controlled environment, and they were studied to see their recovery, and there was no difference between the ones that these people prayed for and the ones that they didn't. And they had images, and they went to the bedside, and well, no, they didn't actually see them in person because that could actually have an effect on the psychology. The patients didn't know about it, but they had like pictures and the video clips of these people that passed, so they could like visualize them really well and say, God, this person make him better. But there wasn't a difference in the recovery time, and that's like the application of science. And another one as well with regards to the military, this a quote that goes something like, if your ideology needs to be defended by force, then your ideology isn't worth shit.
Yeah, that's eloquently and precisely. I couldn't agree more.
The thing is, say your example there, Tom. To a religious person, they're not going to accept that as proof. If you know what I mean. How do you rationally explain to someone the rationality is a good idea?
Well, it depends on the goal. Like,
yeah,
for me, it's all goal oriented. The same with the Finch project. It's like, okay, so we use science in society, but the goal is, to provide for the human condition, globally. So it's like, what do you want from your thinking process? Do you want to live in a world where you can more accurately analyze and change the world around you for your happiness and the others around you? Then the scientific method of thinking would help you with that. If instead you want to think the way you've been conditioned to think, for whatever benefits that would bring, so comfortability maybe would be one, then maybe religion is a better route. It depends on what you want, and neither is better than the other. It's not like a scientific method of thinking is better. It does certain things more efficiently.
What I'm kind of saying with this is, Hayakawa basically splits up our methods of communication into two kind of general areas, which is informative, which is the form that we've really been kind of talking about today. What we're saying with the methods of science and stuff, and using examples and physical reference things. That's kind of informative communication, and that is pretty good for people who are already set up to that kind of thing. So for like what I was saying earlier about the medical records is only information to someone who's actually got the ability to read it. The other side of it is effective communication, which is really communication that's about emotion, about stirring emotion, really. This is kind of where our art and literature comes in. And Jan, I think your short story is a particularly good example of this, because what you're trying to do is, if you wanted to express that informatively, you'd say the methods of science are better than like the bankers, the financiers, the military. That's basically what you said during the thing in informative terms. But because you wrote it in an effective way, which this is a kind of verbatim quote of us, which is kind of, you put people through a symbolic process, through a symbolic experience, kind of linear experience pattern through a book. To get them to understand a point themselves based on that experience, rather than just to say the point. Which is a particularly good way of, say, if you're trying to bridge the gap with people who are religious, who are very religious, you can tell them straight up the informative information that you want to get across to them, but because of their value system, they might not take to that very well. So it might be that a story like that, where it's more kind of emotional, it's like it's a story rather than a piece of information, but it's still designed to convey the same amount of information.
Yeah.
And like, I find if I say to myself, 3 billion people suffering poverty in the world today, it has much less of an impact on me than a single image of a single person suffering because of our social system, because of the emotional impact on me. Like, one's more factual, and one seems to bear more power, the 3 billion, but then the other, which is a simple picture, has more of an emotional impact on me, sometimes anyway.
Yeah. Not pictures talk more than 1,000 words or something like that goes the same.
More than 3 billion words.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the hierarchy of information, of how we receive information, right? The first was, I think, 10% is only reading, 20% was like reading and listening, 70% discussing the subjects, and 90% doing the thing itself. And concerning emotions, right? I read a book not so recently. That talked about how we can best remember things, and the things we remember best are those that are attached to emotion, those that are attached to emotional events, one in which we were happy or we were sad. Those kind of information get more impregnated in our memories than others. For example, I read 10,000 people died today, 20,000 people there. It's like you said, Tom, if I show you a picture of one suffering like that, then that will generate more of this response and more of perhaps action, instead of this passive sitting and lying back and wishing that things might get better.
I wonder why that is. I wonder why our memory works better based on emotions, and in terms of like brain neurology and things like that.
Yeah, that would be an interesting subject, one I cannot explain because I lack the qualifications on that area, the competence.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a book that has kind of helped me with this ideas a bit, but it doesn't go into everything. But Ray Kurzweil's How to Create a Mind. He is mainly speaking about artificial intelligence, but it's based on psychological research, and he does a whole bunch of what he calls brain experiments or mind experiments. Simply things like this: the alphabet, A to Z. You can say it, right? So without saying it, in your head you can go all the way through the alphabet. Now try and do it backwards, and you'll find that most people won't be able to do it backwards without having to actually go, what's before Y, and start from the beginning and then count up but backwards. And just simple things like that show you that, well, the information is in your brain, but it's actually the sequence where you can't access your memory. Your memory is linear.
Yeah.
Because you can't access it backwards.
It's funny you mentioned that, because the way I memorize the alphabet, and I still recall it, which word is where, is by doing the song, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but in my head, like quickly, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, until I go to P, then it's Q, or, I have to always do this song in my head, and backwards would be a disaster. I don't know, it would be like a screeching whiteboard or something like that. I don't know.
I know. There's a lot more stuff in that book, but that's just kind of the one example that I like to start off with. Just as, I don't know, the way no one knows how our brains work yet. We don't know as such. We can just kind of make guesses, and it's little experiments like that you can prove to yourself that your brain works in a certain way. Which I found pretty interesting. There's kind of more varied ones than that.
But it's important to note as well that it's not necessarily innate. Our brains could work like that because of early childhood conditioning and nutrition, things like that.
Yeah, depend on the upbringing, right? the mental tools we were taught.
Yeah.
It would be. Well, you do say that there's certain people who have photographic memories and things like that. So yeah, okay, I'm agree. I'm on your side there.
Yeah, that would be great to have such a memory.
I was just trying to think of an example, and I was like, I don't know anyone who has that. But yeah, photographic memories, I think is great. People with not insomnia, the thing where you can't remember the day, amnesia, and things like that. Is interesting. So yeah, the way that we memorize things is not necessarily defined forever, which is good. Well, I think we've basically covered all our topics today. I hope we've given people some good tools and some good suggestions on how to explain the resource-based economy and the Venus Project to people, or even just in your daily lives trying to explain anything. I hope that we've helped.
Yeah, just the basic understanding of the possibility of misinterpreting someone. It changes the way I communicated with people, really. Like, there was a lot more thought going into it. There's a lot more, well, what does he actually mean by that? So, says, like, I love you. Like, instead of me thinking my interpretation of the word love, it's all about thinking, how much do I know of this person? What do I think they mean by that? What are their intentions? These kind of things that I wouldn't have done before that.
Yeah, and instead of saying to other person, I love you, show that affection, materialize it. Today we are so caught up in these romantic notions that saying I love you and being married has something to do with having a pleasant relationship, or a relationship of trust, of where I can talk to you and you can talk to me, etc. We have to manifest that behavior. If we really want to change things, we don't have to say, loveth your neighbor. We have to simply give them the tools so that they can know how to loveth the neighbor. You know what I mean?
That'd be true love, really. Allowing someone to be more happy, not just saying I love you. It's giving them the ability to express themselves, etc.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll just end off with a few kind of shout-outs. Our Facebook group, for anyone who hasn't found it already, is the Venus Project United Kingdom. Everyone can join up. We have weekly meetings on Mondays, and we have much information and talking, and basically people around who can chat and make friends. So come on down and get involved. Does anyone else have any kind of notifications right at the end?
Just that there are a few projects going on in the Venus Project UK as well. So, if you want to get involved with activism and you're in the UK, that would be a good place to start. Would be the Facebook group, and just get in touch with people.
That is a good point. Yeah, one of our big projects that we have on right now is to try and get Paradise or Oblivion shown in as many places as we can. So if anyone listening owns somewhere that might be able to put on a viewing, even if it's just a couple people in your house, we can try and help you and support you through that. We can maybe attend, depending on locations, or just attend remotely, and we can get Q&As going and all that kind of stuff. So that's a big drive that we're on kind of this year.
Yep.
Great. And that's it. Thanks, guys.
High production quality.
Yeah. We'll see everyone in 2 weeks.
All right. Yes. Thanks for listening.